Palestine,
فلسطين
terrain sonore.
أصوات ميدان البحث.
A podcast of the French Institute for the Near East in the Palestinian territories. By Lucie Duvignac and Clémence Vendriès. Épisode 2, Coronavirus, Jerusalem Inside Out. Épisode 2, Coronavirus, Jérusalem hors les murs.
Viruses do not care about cements and they can move from here or there because people still move. I'm crossing a checkpoint every day in order to pass to Jerusalem. The accessibility through the numerous types of gates and crossings and points is also a type to surveil people and keep a close eye on them. Too many questions.
Too many borders.
I work I study because I love this country.
In March 2020, to fight the coronavirus, both Israel and Palestine announced a state of emergency and the closure of the border wall. For Gaza, which has been under blockade since 2006, nothing changed, apart from the closure of the few existing checkpoints, which in any case often close.
But for the sake of the Israeli economy, Palestinian workers of the West Bank are still authorized to cross the border to work on construction sites in Israel. What does this reveal about the dependence of the Israeli economy on a Palestinian labor force?
Since 2018, Walid Habbas has been studying the economic links between Israel and the Palestinian workers of the West Bank. He is a PhD student in sociology based in Jerusalem. His PhD focuses on the period after 2005, following the Second Intifada and the construction of the separation wall.
As a researcher, Walid investigates the increased integration of the West Bank into the Israeli economy. This happens alongside the intensification of Israeli colonial control over Palestinian lives. As a Palestinian, Walid is also the target of this monitoring. He's a Jerusalem native from the village of Kufr Aqab, situated between two borders.
Welcome, Walid.
Thank you. Hello.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Jerusalem in January 1980, and also I was raised up in Jerusalem. I studied in a school in Jerusalem, and my friends were in Jerusalem. My center of life was also in Jerusalem.
How did you meet Palestine?
Listen, I was born in Palestine. For me, Palestine is only a homeland. But when I grew up and I had more conscious about what's really going on here, the conflict and the struggle and being under colonialism, so the idea of homeland is not the same as in any other country. So I built a new relationship between me and this place, which cannot be defined maybe by words. As I grew more and more, and I realized that as natives under colonialism, we need to take actions, we need to build more conscious about our lives, to establish an emancipatory project. So my relationship with Palestine is more sophisticated. Maybe you can say that this country is part of myself.
You're a resident of Jerusalem living in Kufr Aqab. But you can say at the same time that Kufr Aqab is inside Jerusalem and outside Jerusalem. How come?
For me and for everybody living in Kufr Aqab, we need to cross on daily basis a checkpoint in order to go into the city which we are supposed to be part of. And sometimes we suffer from closures, we need to go to bypassing roads, we need to fall into crazy traffic jams. So living here in Kufr Aqab is extraordinary experience. I was born here and I love this place. In my childhood, Kufr Aqab was only a small village. It has a few population and very beautiful places and sites. But things started to change gradually, especially after the second military uprising,
also known as the Second Intifada.
when Israel started to erect a segregation and annexation wall, and I will explain that. Geographically, Kufr Aqab is part of the municipality borders of Jerusalem. It has been annexed to Jerusalem in 1967, so de jure, Kufr Aqab remains under the jurisdictions of the municipality of Jerusalem. But de facto, after the construction of the segregation and annexation wall, Kufr Aqab became on the other side of the wall. So people need to cross military and fortified checkpoints in order to cross to Kufr Aqab. Kufr Aqab can be better defined as a statelessness place. Statelessness place is a place that is not the same as no man's land. Statelessness means it is a man's land. It is by force connected to the Israeli municipality in Jerusalem, but this municipality is neglecting Kufr Aqab. It is a very small yet overcrowded place. There is no official government who's taking care of Kufr Aqab, neither for the infrastructure, water, electricity, etc., etc. Most importantly, nobody is caring about policing Kufr Aqab and taking care about the security of the people. So as in any other place in the world where there's a statelessness condition, there are a lot of crimes, but it is occupied by the Israeli forces. This municipality, which is supposed to be responsible on Kufr Aqab, is preventing any other, and here I'm referring to the Palestinian Authority, to govern Kufr Aqab and to take control of what's happening in this place.
What you just described is the situation that you have already been living with. But with the virus, how has the quarantine affected life in Kufr Aqab?
Who said that there is a quarantine here?
Good question.
I was kidding. Listen, this is a situation where everybody needs to stay at home. But if we look closely at the quarantine in every place in the world, we can see that there is a government which is imposing, or let's not use the word imposition, but it is taking care of the quarantine. Here in Kufr Aqab, the quarantine is like voluntarily thing. No policing is imposing restrictions here, so it is up to the people. And because people here needs to work, they still go out to Jerusalem and into Israel. People interact on daily basis, and it's a very small place. If you wanna go down from your apartment to buy something from a grocery, for sure you would meet like more than 20 people in very closed areas. So you be like in 1 meter or maybe less contact with everybody. I think it is dangerous here during the COVID-19.
In this type of insecurity, staff from the Palestinian Authority visited the streets of your neighborhood for the first time. Usually, they can't and don't do anything in this area because Kufr Aqab is part of the Israeli municipality of Jerusalem. How did the people of Kufr Aqab react?
I think people in Kufr Aqab do not really respect the Palestinian policemen, so they have no word here in Kufr Aqab. I saw some patrols roaming around here, but they came here like once every week for only 10 to 15 minutes, and then they drew away because its jurisdictions and powers is delegated from the Israeli civil administration. So we are not talking here about two separate distinct apparatuses. I mean the Palestinian apparatuses and the Israeli apparatuses. But we are talking about a delegation of powers from the colonial powers to Palestinian cooperators. If Israel has the capability and resources to govern Kufr Aqab indirectly, so it is so. If not, so it can coordinate with the apparatuses that have like a different agreements with Israel. I don't think that the Palestinian Authority presence in Kufr Aqab, which is part of Jerusalem, made any difference. Here we need like a real government that can take care about the health situation, the economic situation, to care about the poor people, because people are not working. So there is a lot of things to do.
In this political and personal context, you decided to do your PhD on the Palestinian workers in Israel and their role in the political economy of Israel and Palestine. How did you come up with this topic?
I was not sure what exactly I'm going to research until I came to this idea where I was looking for the relationship between Palestinian economic actors and the Israeli colonial institutions. Because there have been daily contacts, especially in the economic sphere, between both sides. The modes of interaction between Palestinian actors and the colonial bureaucracy or institutions is unknown in the literature. And I'm choosing specific case studies from here or there to see how does this interaction manifests itself. I always had been interested in how power relations underpinning the struggle goes on, and how do these power relations between the colonizer and the colonized affect the unfoldment of the struggle, especially after the Palestinian military uprising in 2004.
Your fieldwork is under a lot of pressure and a lot of changes. Have you been able to do your fieldwork during this time?
I succeeded to make one interview with the head of the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, but beside that I did not attempt to make any interviews, especially because my interviewees are economic actors and the Palestinian economy is almost shut down now. So everybody is at home. Of course, it's not a good thing. It's something like a very bad thing, but it is a unique situation where it would give me a chance to investigate how did the coronavirus affected both economies, the Israeli and the Palestinian economy. I wish I can trace it. It is hard to do so. It needs from me intensive fieldwork to go from here or there, which until now I did not start.
You live a few meters away from the Canondia checkpoint, which connects and separates the cities of Jerusalem and Ramallah. The Palestinian workers in your research also cross this checkpoint on a daily basis. Studying and living on a border, how would you define what a border is?
The employment of the term borders for me might be a little bit misleading because research on Palestine have been dominated by a two-state solution since Oslo Accords in 1993. When we say borders to anyone in the world, they might imagine two states and an in-between border. For me, it is not a border because what we think about as a Palestinian a future state in the West Bank, in fact, it is not like that because the Palestinian localities are not a continuous geographical territory. They are 60 islands, about 60 sealed and scattered enclaves, and in between there is an Israeli space and Israeli control. And the mobility of Palestinians in between is not a border crossing. So I would rather call it an Israeli space control system in which the segregation and annexation wall is only one component. Of course, it is the central component, but it is one component of the Israeli space control system. Beside the numerous checkpoints, fences, electric fences, surveillance cameras, settlements, industrial zones, and closed military zones, etc., etc. Even though I go through inspecting a point through a wall and a gate, even that it is not a border. So I am moving between different spaces and under different colonial relations of power. At the beginning, I thought that it was a border, but at the end, I made up my mind that in fact it is a colonial space. So the Israeli space control system for me has three functions. First, for creeping annexation of additional territories. This way, the Palestinian territories are shrinking and at the same time the Israeli spaces are expanding. So this is not a feature that we can see in borders. Maybe it is more like a frontier. It's like a moving frontier where the colonial powers are expanding more and more. The second function of the Israeli space control system is to control the mobility of the Palestinians as part of the population management. And this is a well-known thesis in the literature, and I've been monitored, passing every day through the checkpoint. And third, the Israeli space control system is a place to pacify the population through manipulating their mobility and controlling who comes in and who comes out. For instance, we see that the segregation and annexation wall is very much porous in front of the Palestinian workers, in front of businessmen, in front of economic actors who really benefit the Israeli economy. But on the other side, they are really sealed places where nobody can cross if they are like not serving the Israeli expansion policies or the Israeli economy.
You're right in the sense that this wall doesn't separate two different sovereign spaces, but that it regulates the movement of every Palestinian. So even if we say that it's not an international boundary, it is still a border because you have to cross something.
If we assume that it is a border, then we need to take into consideration that on both sides of the border, there are Israeli citizens and there are Israeli military forces. If I am living in a city like Nablus and I am unable to cross over my cargo or my goods to Israel because of what we assumed are called borders, then I can easily go through an Israeli settlement and ship my products from that settlement to Israel, and I can use other roads, and this way I can cross no gate. The borders disappear for me.
A border is not synonym of closure, even if in Palestine it may seem so. A border can also be open and integrated into different spaces.
In this example, you can see that I departed from the same point, but first when I go directly through the gates, I was blocked, and if I go through a terminal, which is the settlement in this case, and then I go back to Israel, I would not be like blocked. My neighbors here in Kufr Aqab are Israeli settlers living in a very ugly settlement up the hill. If I can succeed to enter that settlement, then I can go directly through to Israel without passing any border.
Because the West Bank is cut by numerous segregated roads connecting the Israeli colonies and the mainland.
So let us not assume a Westphalia type of border. A Westphalia is that agreement in the 15th century that inaugurated the national states boundaries. For me, in Kufr Aqab, I'm still considered as living inside Israel proper because I've been annexed to Jerusalem. But at the same time, I'm living in the other side of the wall. Moving through space is another experience. You move through different types of spaces. You go through different types of jurisdictions. And all of that is inside the West Bank. Borders can be useful sometimes, but can be hindering analytical tools on the other times. It is a controversial thing that nobody had yet agreed on, and I call for other researchers to come and investigate what some scholars called it the geography of disaster. So maybe this is a call for other people to come and research what's really happening here. And I think you both are part of these researches, right?
What is the impact of the virus on the operation and management of the borders between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the West Bank?
The segregation and annexation wall is in fact a wall for managing the mobility of the population and not blocking their access to Israel. Even now, even in these catastrophic days, people can cross through the checkpoint of Kalandia from Kufr Aqab to Jerusalem easily, and I think more easily than ever because there are no traffic jams. There are daily contacts between Israelis and Palestinians and between residents of Kufr Aqab and residents in Jerusalem. So it is a question on how the Israelis are controlling the Palestinians, whether living inside Israel or in the occupied territories, and what policies are implemented in each era, etc., etc. There are Israeli citizens residing in the West Bank, and they are living in many outposts and settlements and industrial zones that are inside the West Bank. So it is not a question on crossing the wall, it is a question of daily contact between Zionist settlers and Palestinians inside the West Bank, which nobody can stop. For instance, for anybody living inside the Ramallah and very close to Al-Muqata'a, where the Palestinian presence lives, he can cross easily without passing through any checkpoint, and he can go to any bypassing road that is used by also settlers, and they can shake hands, they can fill gas from the same gas station, they can walk into the same groceries, etc., etc., and after that everyone can go back to his home. This is also ironic. Maybe the best way to combat with the coronavirus is to think not in a two-state solution, but to think in one-state reality. Okay, this one-state reality should not at the meantime mean anything political. Okay, it only should mean that all the people residing in Mandatory Palestine, whether they live in Gaza, in Jerusalem, in West Bank, in settlements in the Jordan Valley, or inside Israel, all the residents living here, whether they were settlers or Palestinians, they are living on the same geography, and the daily contact between them is to such an extent that no segregation wall can separate between them.
Through those interactions, one of the populations most exposed to the virus are Palestinian workers. Can you describe to us the evolution of the situation of Palestinian workers employed in Israel since the beginning of March?
The idea was that, like all other Palestinian segments, why not these workers also stay at home until the end of this crisis? But then there was the issue of the Israeli real estates companies, because 67% of the Palestinian workers are working in construction sector inside Israel or inside the settlements, and according to Israeli private sector, this is an essential and vital sector that should not shut down even during the expansion of the coronavirus. So they lobbied at the Israeli government, and they asked that these workers stay working inside their construction sites inside Israel. There had been like several attempts to make agreements between the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel. So for the first time, Israeli Minister of Defense allowed the Palestinian workers to sleep inside Israel for more than 2 months. And this was in order to prevent the expansion of the coronavirus while moving here or there across the checkpoints and the gates. Even this did not really work. And until now, it is estimated that there is like 20 to 25,000 Palestinian workers inside Israel. Most of them come back to the West Bank and then go back to Israel, either on daily basis or once a week. There have been a lot of new corona cases here in the West Bank only because of the Palestinian workers who cross every day to Israel. But also the government of Israel acted in a very unhuman way with the Palestinian workers, because whenever they find that a Palestinian worker is infected, they either throw him on the most proximate checkpoint, or they neglect him and do not test him or take him to any hospital. There had been unique situations where Israeli military patrols took Palestinian infected laborers and threw them just inside Ramallah. Israel has like the resources and the capabilities to control the expansion of the coronavirus, unlike the Palestinian Authority, which lacks a lot of necessary resources. I think that the coronavirus expansion provides for Israel a good opportunity to destroy more the social fabric of the Palestinians.
When the Israeli army leaves Palestinian workers in the middle of Ramallah, it's a breach of the Palestinian quarantine.
Even I would go further and say that since the general quarantine in the West Bank, Israeli military forces broke through several times into Palestinian refugee camps, into the heartlands of the Palestinian cities, and make arrests and demolished houses and walked from door to door to search for Palestinians. And during the corona this did not stop, so this might be more dangerous than a single laborer who came back from home and he did not check himself. I can conclude that the economic integration between the West Bank and Israel is too much complicated in a way that nobody can really separate between the West Bank and Israel. We are now depending to a larger extent on the Israeli economy. Thank you very much.
I'm losing my words in English there, but please, thank you.
Let's think about the next time we are going to hang out and drink something. Let's dream about it.
La Palestine est occupée pour le moment. Veuillez laisser votre message après le bip sonore. Pour réécouter votre message, tapez 1. Pour le réenregistrer, tapez 2. Pour supprimer votre message, tapez 3.
I'm not sure, comrades, where would we meet again? In prison, in a tomb under the ground, or in the shadow of a rose over the ground in our state?